Hello, today I'm going to be looking at the viability of ISO on all the maps. I'm still a bit ill, but I'll try my best to still make it informative. I'm going to be quite brief to rest my voice a bit. But yeah, so first we're going to look at Haven. And I think Haven is going to be a bit more viable on. So this is because of the macro, where you tend to have this obviously 3 sites, and there's 5 defenders. So it's very likely that you'll find, well, it's possible for them to have 2 players at every site. So if you find the one, then you can isolate that fight. And ISO likes isolated fights for multiple reasons. His ult is really, really strong at taking sites versus one player because the rest of the team can then go kill that player and trade. Even if you lose your ult, if you lose in your 1v1 in your ult. And on top of that as well, he likes the isolated fights. So then he has time to shoot the orb and then go take an advantage fight with his armor. And that's kind of how I see Haven. I'll also put Lotus here as well. Even though Lotus isn't played exactly the same, he does have some different things, such as like the contesting. A main is a bit different, even though both maps you tend to contest A main. A tends to be like the most contested place. It is like a lot more essential for defenders to contest that space on, at least in ranked, on Lotus. So I do think that he has viability on that map too, just for the same reason where it's 3 sites, be one player alone on defense, and it can really, really help you to take the side basically. Let's go Bind, and I think Bind is like the top of niche for me. I think he does have a lot of viability with the constant rotations. I feel like he can catch people alone on the constant rotations. I actually think that he might thrive being a bit of a lurker, where he can lurk originally to find the fight and then go join his team with armor. And that's like a pretty viable way to sort of see him macro wise. You can also see him as like being with his team, forcing rotations, then lurking to find a single player, then coming back with his team once he has his armor. But I can see that working out as well in Bind. I think that's a way to play Bind as well, in some ways, with using the rotations, the fast rotations. On defense, he's going to be a lot harder to play though. Next we got next we got Ascent. And I think on Ascent, I don't see a reason to play him necessarily. I think that he doesn't fit in to any of the slots possible. I think on these maps, there's a chance that he can fit in one of the slots and replace someone. Maybe a bit of a comp switch around could work. I don't see that happening on Ascent. I feel like Ascent is a bit too set in stone, a bit too meta's just too much, too set, I think. And I don't think ISO mixes it also. Next we've got Breeze, and I think a lot of people are down on Breeze with ISO, but I think he's pretty good on Breeze, especially when looking in the macro sense. Once again, where he's able to isolate those fights versus the Vipers and the Cyphers that are going to be populating A and B. Obviously, he does suck around mid, but I feel like he's Reyna-esque once he does get that isolated fight. He does have that snowball potential. It's just a bit slower. He's just overall, I think he's a bit slower version of Reyna. In some ways, a bit more util-sided. And I do think that he does have viability on Breeze. I'm not sure exactly how he would fit into a comp properly though. But I do think like as an agent isolated, he is viable on Breeze. So I'm going like a bit crazy on this one, not really actually having like a proper plot for him necessarily. I also think Breeze is one of those maps where I don't think people realize how viable some agents can be on Breeze, because the way that the Breeze is going to set out as opposed to other maps, the other maps would tend to be like quite a bit of cover, and then they'll have like the old open space, and that can make agents like Raze really viable. But they don't realize but I don't think a lot of people realize that flipped around, it still makes those agents viable in different reasons. So for instance, I think Raze is underrated on Breeze, and I think ISO is a bit underrated on Breeze, because when there's massive areas of space, there are times when where enemies can populate those giant massive spaces, and your util is not going to be that useful. Like your Raze nade's not going to really hit them very much because they have a lot of space to maneuver around. But when you want to do set plays, it becomes really easy to put your util in a place where it's effective, because you can just put it in that like small amount of cover. Like imagine going A, right, and you take site, but there's only backside left to take. If you just put a Raze nade in yellow, or like behind yellow, you've basically cleared the backside because there's like no other place that isn't exposed. So, and I think that's like a good way to see ISO with some of his like isolation stuff, where the enemy's kind of going to be isolated on the map as it is, with like they're going to be isolated in those covered spots. I also think, well, once again, on a macro way, and like on a macro level as well, Viper and Cypher are going to be at the extremities of the map with a strong side mid, probably like a strong mid with like 3 players mid. Is how that's how it's usually played. Obviously not every round, but that's how it's usually played. That's how Tents like to play it. Usually like meta wise. I think ISO can take advantage of that sometimes. Next we've got Split. So I'm a bit split on Split. I'm not sure exactly how viable he'll be. I think once again it's one of those maps where mid is important, so there's going to be these isolated extremities that he can take advantage of, and I think that in ranked he's going to be quite good in it, especially because I think that he's really good on maps where rotations can be difficult for defenders. And so I think on Split, like, he's pretty strong, or at least he can be. I do think he has his niche. I just don't know how useful he's going to be holistically on Split. I think he probably doesn't have enough util to be placing anyone. And he's not a dive agent, and I think dive agents are really strong. And next we've got Sunset, which is the last one. And I think Sunset's also a niche. I think that he can, once again, this is a map where defense rotations are kind of inhibited, where they can't really go through like the front of mid, because if you're sitting there, then you're going to punish them. So a lot of defenders tend to go through their own spawn. And that's like one of the times where you can find isolated fights off the rotations. And I think ISO, in ranked especially, is going to be able to, like on a macro level, I don't think people realise it right now, ISO is going to be a lot more frustrating to play against than Reyna if you know what you're doing macro-wise. Especially because to be fair, he plays off it quite well with his. So I do think, I think that he's viable on Sunset. So yeah, I think that's it for the video. Bit of a fast one. My throat isn't too great, but I'll see you in my next one. Thanks for watching.